A flicker of light dances across your vision, a fleeting whisper of meaning in an otherwise ordinary moment. You feel a rush of excitement. Could this be a sign? A message from the hidden currents of the universe? Welcome to a world where every coincidence shimmers with potential, where the mundane may conceal a secret portkey to deeper truths. But beware, when every glance, every passing stranger, every half-heard phrase is cast as cosmic instruction, the path to insight can swiftly twist into an obsession that blinds you to life itself. In this journey, we peel back the veil on the dark side of synchronicity, those uncanny alignments of events that Carl Jung called meaningful coincidences. We'll venture through the flickering lantern light of ancient seers and the hushed libraries of modern psychologists, listening for the echoes of wisdom that warn us. Not all signs lead home. Some lure us into labyrinths of our own making, where the hunger for significance devours spontaneity, and the quest for hidden patterns fractures our grasp on reality. Today's exploration will reveal how the same gift that can ignite wonder, the ability to perceive hidden threads connecting seemingly unrelated phenomena, can, when misused, ensnare us in a web of compulsive interpretation. You'll learn to recognize the seductive pull of overanalysis, how subtle anxieties masquerade as spiritual hunger, and why the brightest light can cast the darkest shadow. We'll trace the steps of mystics who cautioned against reading too deeply into every ripple, and examine the modern mirror of their warnings in internet forums, self-help seminars, and even social media feeds, where pattern seekers gather, often unaware of how far they've strayed from genuine insight. As we journey onward, prepare to confront the paradox at the heart of synchronicity, that true wisdom lies not in amassing signs, but in discerning which whispers are worth heeding. By the end of this episode, you'll carry with you a shield against obsession, a compass to navigate the shimmering maze of symbols without losing your footing in the real world. Draw a steady breath, for the gates are opening. Across millennia, civilizations from Mesopotamia to Greece and China have cataloged omens and oracles to discern the unseen patterns underlying human fate and cosmic order. The I Ching, or Book of Changes, emerged in the Western Zhou period as a cosmological divination manual of 64 hexagrams that shaped Chinese philosophical thought. In the Hellenistic world, the Hermetic tradition preserved in the Corpus Hermeticum attributed to Hermes Trismegistus offered an esoteric synthesis of Egyptian and Greek wisdom, later rediscovered by Renaissance humanists. Carl Jung, drawing on the I Ching and his collaboration with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, coined synchronicity to articulate these causal, meaningful coincidences in the 20th century. Over time, many of these teachings were sidelined by mainstream institutions, only to be revived and reinterpreted within analytical psychology and modern esoteric circles. Early divination and omens in ancient civilizations. By the 2nd millennium BCE, Babylonian scholars compiled the Enuma, Anu, and Lil, a magisterial series of some 6,500 celestial omens that guided royal decisions in the Neo-Assyrian court. Across Babylonia and Assyria, diviners recorded omens from terrestrial signs, animal births, the birth of two-headed lambs, or the appearance of spiders and meteorites, convinced that each perceptual detail bore the imprint of divine will. Rather than merely foretelling the future, early Mesopotamian diviners sought divine manifestation in everyday phenomena, compiling thousands of cuneiform tablets to record the movements of stars, weather patterns, and animal behavior as cosmic messages. Collections like the Chronicle of Early Kings and the Religious Chronicle further interwove omen literature with law and medical practice, demonstrating how these insights underpinned social and political order. Meanwhile, in classical Greece, the Delphic oracle was revered as the navel of the world, where the Pythia, seated above a natural chasm of intoxicating vapors, delivered cryptic pronouncements believed to be the voice of Apollo. Oracular utterances were composed in Greek hexameters, later preserved as the Sibylline oracles, and consulted by city-states on weighty matters of war, colonization, and religious reform. The lore of oracles extended beyond Delphi to sanctuaries such as Dodona, where rustling oak leaves spoke divine whispers, and Didyma, where sacred springs served as mediums of prophecy. The I Ching and Chinese cosmology. Originating in the Western Zhou dynasty, circa 1000 to 750 BCE, the I Ching, or Yi Jing, literally the classic of changes, provided a manual for claromantic divination using yarrow stalks or coins to generate one of 64 hexagrams, each accompanied by poetic line statements and a hexagram judgment. Over time, the I Ching accrued the 10 wings, Confucian commentaries that transformed it into a profound cosmological treatise on the cyclical interplay of yin and yang. Archaeological evidence shows that by the Warring States period, its divinatory text was consulted across social strata, from royal courts to private households, for guidance on health, business, and personal affairs. The Hermetic tradition and esoteric lineage's Hermeticism owes its name to Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary amalgam of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian deity Thoth, whose teachings were preserved in the Hermetica, a corpus of philosophical and technical treatises composed between 200 BCE and 300 CE. The philosophical Hermetica, embodied in the Corpus Hermeticum, expounds on the divine nature of humanity, the structure of the cosmos, and the ascent of the soul through gnosis and theurgy. In the 15th century, Renaissance humanists such as Marsilio Ficino translated these texts into Latin, positioning them as evidence of a Prisca Theologia, an ancient theology predating Moses and Plato. However, the rise of Enlightenment empiricism cast Hermetic texts into the shadows, branding them as superstition until modern esoteric revivalism and academic scholarship reclaimed their significance. Jung's Synchronicity, a modern bridge. In May 1930, Jung publicly introduced synchronicity in his memorial address for Richard Wilhelm, defining it as a causal connecting principle, linking inner psychological states with outer events in meaningful patterns. His formative encounters with the I Ching led him to view such divinatory coincidences not as chance, but as glimpses of a deeper reality woven into the collective unconscious. Through decades of correspondence with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, Jung explored how quantum non-locality offered a metaphorical scaffold for understanding psychological entanglement with the material world. While hailed by depth psychologists and paranormal researchers, critics dismissed synchronicity as untestable, underscoring the enduring tension between mystical insight and scientific skepticism. At its essence, synchronicity describes events that, though causally unrelated, resonate with personal significance, as if the universe itself conspired to whisper in your ear. Carl Jung introduced synchronicity in 1930 as a causal connecting principle, suggesting that inner psychological states and outer events can align in ways that defy conventional cause and effect. Such meaningful coincidences can spark wonder, embolden seekers, and open doors to unexpected insights. Yet, as any skilled tracker of signs will tell you, the very mechanisms that allow us to detect resonances can also lead us astray. The brain's pattern-hungry machinery. Our brains evolved to seek patterns, an adaptive trait crucial for survival but susceptible to misfires. The German psychiatrist Klaus Conrad coined apophenia to describe the mind's tendency to perceive meaningful connections in random data, originally noting this phenomenon in psychotic patients but later recognizing it as a universal feature of human cognition. Science historian Michael Shermer labeled this habit patternicity, defining it as the tendency to find meaningful patterns in meaningless noise, a cognitive shortcut that underpins everything from myth-making to modern conspiracy theories. When we overindulge this talent, connecting stray details, half-heard whispers, or random symbols, we set the stage for obsession. Once we spot a sliver of synchronicity, a repeated number sequence, a symbolic animal crossing our path, our confirmation bias springs into action. This bias drives us to zero in on evidence that reinforces our initial hunch, while dismissing or forgetting what doesn't fit the narrative. Consider the modern seeker who notices the number 1111 on a clock. Each subsequent glance at that same pattern confirms their belief in an unfolding cosmic message, even as the hundreds of other random times go unremarked. What begins as playful curiosity can spiral into an all-consuming quest. Every sighting feels freighted with destiny, every mundane event reframed as an omens-laden clue, from wonder to compulsion. In its milder form, apophenia can spark creativity and optimism. People report feeling encouraged, guided, and supported by these chance alignments. But when the hunt for meaning becomes relentless, it treads dangerously close to the territory of obsession, where intrusive thoughts demand ever deeper analysis and rituals to decode life's messages. Here, the distinction between synchronicity and obsessive-compulsive patterns blurs. Compulsions to gather more signs and rituals to ensure their accuracy mirror the rigidity of OCD, trapping seekers in cycles of anxiety and relief that offer only fleeting solace. The seductive imagine a traveler in a desert, convinced that each grain of sand holds a secret. The more they examine, the more they believe they see hidden texts and maps etched into the dunes. In reality, the mirages of pattern recognition can fabricate labyrinths in an otherwise empty expanse. As Kelvin Winter warns, overinterpretation of synchronicities can breed paranoia. What once uplifted the spirit may now ignite fear, as everyday noises and chance glances morph into sinister portents of doom. When signs become so pervasive that one cannot enjoy silence or spontaneity, the line between genuine insight and self-imposed delusion vanishes. Consider Mira, a creative soul who began noticing feathers wherever she walked, on sidewalks, bookstore floors, even on her office chair. At first, she felt buoyed by the sensation that these soft tokens heralded protection and connection to something greater. But soon she found herself retracing her steps each morning to gather feathers, cataloging their sizes and colors in an intricate ledger. Meetings, meals, and quiet moments were all interrupted by an incessant check. Was today's feather white or gray? Which bird granted this message? Over time, the feathers ceased to inspire awe. They became shackles she could not discard. Mira's story illustrates how a healthy recognition of synchronicity can metamorphose into a narrow obsession that eclipses real life. She lost sleep, withdrew from friends who could not match her frantic pace of sign-seeking, and felt anxiety whenever a day passed without a feather in sight. The very phenomenon that once felt like a guiding thread across the tapestry of existence had become a noose, tightening with each new clue. By examining these dynamics, patternicity, confirmation bias, and the transition from curiosity to compulsion, we begin to see why the dark side of synchronicity is no mere theoretical risk, but a lived threat to our mental balance. In the next part, we will delve deeper into the paradoxes and hidden meanings that lie at the heart of this practice, exploring how ancient wisdom cautioned against reading too deeply into every ripple of chance. The hushed corridors of hidden knowledge, there lies a paradox. The very synchronicities that lift us toward transcendence can, when misread, become the architects of our own undoing. To navigate this shadow realm, we must first unravel the subtle grammar of signs and learn to distinguish authentic whispers from phantom echoes. The paradox of choice and the infinite mirror. Imagine a vast library in which every book represents a possible meaning. Each time we encounter a coincidence, a crow's caw at dawn, a phrase half remembered from childhood, we open yet another volume. For the sincere seeker, this is exhilarating. Each page turned promises revelation, yet in an infinite library, choice becomes paralysis. As philosopher Søren Kierkegaard intuited, when faced with endless possibilities, the self begins to fragment, torn between competing narratives. Every new interpretation spawns further permutations. Was it a sign of impending love, a warning to beware, or merely the echo of anxious longing? This infinite mirror of meanings can loop back upon itself, drawing us into a hall of mirrors where certainty dissolves and existential vertigo sets in. Myth and misconception. The tinderbox of projection stories abound of mystics who followed their visions to hidden groves or mountain summits, only to discover that their quest was less about divinity than their own projections. Consider the legend of the alchemist Basil Valentine, who purportedly deciphered the Emerald Tablet and saw in its cryptic lines a map to the Philosopher's Stone. Modern scholarship suggests these texts often shifted hands and tongues, each translator unconsciously imprinting personal hopes and biases upon the words. Thus, what reads as cosmic instruction may in fact be the fever dream of our own psyche. When synchronicity devolves into projection, we mistake our inner dramas for messages from beyond, conflating desire with destiny. Ancient Gnostic teachings speak of the pleroma, a fullness of divine emanations, and its counterpart, the kenoma, the void of ignorance. Synchronicity in its purest form reflects a momentary glimpse of the pleroma, an alignment that bursts through the konoma's darkness. Yet when we chase these glimpses compulsively, we risk splitting off shards of meaning, each fragment a little light that cannot illuminate the whole. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke warned of the terror of having too much to say, for each fragment carries the weight of the infinite. In practical terms, this means that every symbol, every feather, number, or dream is potentially a doorway to insight, but only when held lightly, clutched too tightly, and the key dissolves in your hand. Advanced seekers have long employed paradox to transcend the mind's traps. In Zen koans, riddles like, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" the practitioner is forced to sit in unresolved tension, refusing the easy solace of interpretation. This deliberate suspension of meaning cultivates an open receptivity, allowing genuine synchronicities to arise unforced. Similarly, the Sufi poet Omar Khayyam mused that the wine of truth tastes sweetest when sipped, not poured. In other words, we must taste each coincidence, savor its texture, then let it slip away, unappraised and unclaimed. This practice dissolves the frantic grasping that turns signs into shackles and instead fosters an intimacy with the unknown. Consider the silence between musical notes. It is not empty but charged with possibility. Likewise, the spaces between coincidences are fertile ground, moments when life breathes unburdened by hidden agendas. Ancient shamans spoke of the void dance, a trance in which practitioners lay still for days, embracing the silence until it transformed into song. By cultivating these pauses, through meditation, solitude in nature, or simple moments of unstructured awareness, we create an inner landscape spacious enough to recognize when a sign truly matters and when it is simply the universe humming its unremarkable tune. Neuroscientist David Eagleman's research suggests our brains categorize experiences into patterns at a threshold of novelty. Too familiar, and the event passes unnoticed. Too novel, and it registers as noise. True synchronicity occupies a Goldilocks zone, just novel enough to stir the mind, yet resonant enough to touch the heart. When we learn to track this zone, we no longer chase every glint in the periphery, but instead cultivate a discerning gaze that notices the moments poised at the brink of meaning. These are the grain of sand moments that hum with potential, offering genuine instruction without demanding our surrender. In this deeper exploration, we've traced the fine line between illumination and illusion, learning that mastery lies not in collecting every sign, but in dancing with the mystery itself. In the next section, we will turn outward, translating these insights into practical rituals and techniques that honor synchronicity's gifts without succumbing to its dangers. Feel the pulse of synchronicity in your veins, not as a tyrant demanding tribute, but as a subtle guide whose touch is felt only when we stand still enough to notice. These 5 practices will honor the gift of meaningful coincidence without chaining your spirit to its whims. The pause of receptivity. Before hunting for signs, cultivate a moment of spacious silence each morning. Close your eyes and inhale slowly for 4 counts. Hold for 4, then exhale for 4. Repeat 3 times. In this gentle pause, imagine the mind's ceaseless chatter settling like dust on still water. By greeting the day with this quiet receptivity, you allow authentic synchronicities to surface, unforced, untainted by desperation. The one-word journal. Carry a small notebook. Whenever a coincidence truly catches your breath, perhaps a single raven silhouette at dusk or a line from a stranger's song that stirs your heart, write down just one evocative word: raven, time, echo. Resist the urge to elaborate, theorize, or interpret. This minimalist record trains you to notice genuine sparks of wonder without weaving them into obsessive narratives. Ritual of dual awareness. At sunset, stand facing east, then turn slowly to west, pausing at the zenith of your turn. Breathe deeply, acknowledging first your inner landscape, thoughts, emotions, intentions, then your outer world, the colors in the sky, the rustle of evening insects, the weight of gravity on your feet. This ritual of dual awareness anchors you in both realms, reminding you that synchronicities live at the intersection of inner and outer, not solely in your projections. The not knowing mantra. When you feel the lure of compulsive analysis, when every glance at the clouds begins to carry portent, silently intone the mantra, "I do not know." Embrace these 3 words as an act of surrender, a gift to the void that held all possibilities before your mind chopped them into stories. By practicing not knowing, you break the spell of certainty and re-enter the Goldilocks zone where true synchronicities alight. Community of the unseen path. Seek out a small circle, 2 or 3 kindred spirits, committed to exploring meaningful coincidences without judgment or pressure. Meet once a week. Share 1 moment each that felt synchronistic, then sit together in silence for 5 minutes. Resist the urge to debate or decode. This humble gathering reinforces that synchronicity is first a personal communion with mystery, not material for public performance or competitive one-upmanship. Each of these practices is a thread in a tapestry of mindful engagement. They ask you to slow, to record, to oscillate between worlds, to let go and to commune. Each movement dissolving the compulsion that turns wonder into obsession. Over time, you will find the patterns you seek not in fevered pursuit, but unfolding naturally at the crossroads of your attention and the world's quiet choreography. Carry these rituals into your daily life like talismans, gentle reminders that true insight arrives when the heart is steady, the mind is spacious, and the soul remains free to dance between the seen and the unseen. In our final chapter, we will weave these threads into a concluding vision that anchors our journey and points toward the next horizon of discovery. Throughout this exploration, we've journeyed from the dawn of ancient divination through Jung's groundbreaking concept of meaningful coincidence, unearthing the subtle mechanisms of apophenia and confirmation bias that can transform wonder into compulsion. We traced how historical traditions, from Mesopotamian omens to the I Ching and Hermetic texts, offered frameworks for interpreting hidden messages, only to discover that these once sacred practices can become labyrinths of overanalysis without mindful boundaries. As we've seen, true insight doesn't lie in amassing every feather, number, or flicker of pattern, but in discerning the thin edge where genuine synchronicity glimmers, poised between novelty and significance. Jung himself reminded us that synchronicities are forms without form, elusive interactions that resist capture and demand reverence, not dissection. He warned that those who chase these ghostly shapes risk substituting fascination for genuine understanding, construing each fragment as an absolute truth rather than a fleeting glimpse. When the mind's hunger for pattern devolves into apophenia, we risk forging phantom connections that tether us to self-imposed delusions rather than guiding lights. Left unchecked, confirmation bias amplifies these illusions, filtering reality until only the stories we crave remain visible. Ancient whispers from Zen koans to Sufi paradoxes teach us to hold questions lightly, cultivating not knowing as a practice that preserves the integrity of true synchronicity. This gentle openness prevents the mind from fast-tracking every stray detail into a rigid narrative. Daily rituals, whether a silent sunrise pause, a one-word journal entry, or a communal sharing circle, anchor us in balance, honoring coincidences without surrendering to compulsion. They let us taste each moment's potential without gulping its meaning whole. By weaving these practices into the fabric of our lives, we transform synchronicity from an obsessive chase into a graceful dance with mystery, where presence trumps interpretation and wonder outshines certainty. May you step forward armed with discernment and openness, ready to greet the world's subtle signals without being overtaken by them. Will you choose the path where awareness is your guide and obsession falls away, so that every coincidence becomes a whisper of wonder, not a demand for certainty?